The beginning of chains. I still remember the day I lost my name. Once I was a son, a brother, maybe even a dreamer. But Rome doesn't remember names. It remembers only owners. Before the chains, I had a home, far away from the noise of Roman markets, beyond the olive fields. My people lived in peace, tending to the soil, whispering to the wind, and dreaming under open skies. Freedom was not a gift, it was life itself. We laughed, we sang, we loved. And I never thought the sound of laughter could ever disappear, until they came. It was dawn when the ground trembled under iron feet. Roman soldiers, armored like beasts of war, faces cold as marble. They didn't come for trade. They came for us, for slaves, for lives that could be bought and sold like cattle. I remember the smoke rising above our huts, the cries of mothers echoing through the valley. My father fought, a brave, foolish man. But a Roman sword doesn't forgive courage. I saw him fall, and in that single breath, my childhood ended. They tied my hands with coarse rope, the kind that bites into your skin until blood replaces tears. I was dragged across fields, barefoot, bleeding, terrified. But not yet broken. Not yet. For days we marched. A line of lost souls, bound together by fear. The Roman sun burned our backs. The guards laughed, and the scent of death followed us. One by one, those who couldn't walk were left behind, their bodies feeding the vultures. I stopped crying. Crying was for the free. When we finally reached the coast, I saw something I'd never seen before, a Roman ship. It was enormous, like a floating fortress, its sails wide and proud. That's when I realized what we were, not people, not even prisoners, cargo. They branded us with hot iron, a mark that seared not just the flesh, but the soul. I can still feel the burn when I close my eyes. The letter R for Roma, as if that single mark erased every memory of who I was. The journey across the sea was a nightmare carved into endless waves. The smell of salt mixed with sweat and sickness. Some prayed to gods I'd never heard of. Others just stared blankly, their minds already gone. Every night the ocean sang, a haunting lullaby for the lost. And every morning, fewer of us woke up. When the ship finally reached Rome, I thought I had seen the worst. I was wrong. The city was a living beast, stone, smoke, and greed. Marble palaces kissed the sky, while beneath them, men like me were sold for silver. The air was filled with shouting, prices, bids, laughter. The slave market. They lined us up like animals. A merchant rubbed oil on my skin to make me look strong. Another forced my mouth open, checking my teeth like a horse. I wanted to scream, but my voice had forgotten how. And then I saw her. A Roman woman draped in silk, her eyes sharp as a dagger. She looked at me the way one looks at a tool, useful but replaceable. She raised her hand slightly, and just like that, I was sold. That was the day my life ended, and another began. The life of a slave. They took me to a grand domus, a house so vast it could swallow my entire village. Marble floors, golden lamps, fountains whispering in the courtyard. But behind that beauty, there was rot, cruelty hidden behind polished smiles. I was given a new name, Tiro, a name that wasn't mine, chosen by lips that would never say it with love. I slept on the cold stone floor near the kitchen, and every morning before dawn, I rose to light fires, clean, carry, serve, and bow. My back became a map of scars, each one a lesson in obedience. I learned quickly, in Rome, silence is survival. Speak only when spoken to. Never look a master in the eye. Move fast, think slow, and never, ever hope. The house was a world divided. The masters dined in luxury, eating fruits from distant lands, while we, the slaves, ate their leftovers, bones, crumbs, and dreams. Sometimes, when I served wine at their feasts, I'd listen to them talk of power, wars, and glory. They spoke of the Republic, of honor, of Rome's greatness, but never of the hands that built it, hands like mine. At night, when everyone slept, I'd stare at the moon through the small barred window and wonder, does it see me? Does it see all of us, trapped in this endless silence? One night, an older slave named Darius whispered to me, "Don't forget who you are, boy. They can take your name, your body, your freedom, but not your soul. Keep it hidden, deep inside, where no chain can reach." I didn't understand him then, but I remembered his words. Days turned into months. The woman who bought me, my domina, used me to carry water, tend to the gardens, and sometimes, just to remind herself that she owned me. Every mistake meant pain, a whip, a slap, or worse. Silence. That silence, that cold, disappointed silence, it could break you more than any lash. Once, I dropped a silver cup. It rolled across the floor, ringing like a bell of doom. I froze. She turned. Slowly, her eyes calm, almost amused. Then, she whispered, "Kneel." That was the first time I tasted blood from my own mouth. And yet, even as I bled, I didn't cry. Not because I was brave, but because something inside me had gone quiet, like a candle snuffed out in the wind. But deep down, hidden in the ashes of my soul, something small still burned, a memory. My father's voice, my mother's laughter, the smell of rain on free soil. That tiny ember of memory kept me alive. I told myself that one day I would tell this story. The story of the ones Rome forgot. The ones whose sweat built its temples, whose cries echoed beneath its marble halls. Because history remembers the conquerors, but never the conquered. And I was one of them. The sound of crackling fire fades. A low hum of wind through Roman streets begins. A pause, as the voice breathes deeply. Tomorrow, they say I'll be sent to the fields. They call it the countryside. I call it another prison. But I will go, and I will remember. Because to forget would mean Rome has won. The fields of despair. When the day came, they woke me before sunrise. The sky was still bleeding with the color of dawn when they chained my wrists again. This time, I wasn't alone. Dozens of us, all slaves, packed together on a wooden cart. The wheels creaked, horses neighed, and the city of Rome slowly disappeared behind us. They said we were being sent to Latium, the countryside, to work in the vineyards and fields of the empire's finest estates. To the Romans, it was paradise. To us, it was a grave without walls. The journey took days. The air grew dry. The road endless. I could taste dust more than breath. Every night we slept under open skies, bound together by chains so tight they sang whenever we moved. The stars above were cold and distant, watching silently as we suffered below. Finally, we reached the estate, a land so vast it felt like the gods themselves had stretched it to the horizon. Vineyards rolled like green oceans, olive trees stood like guards, and at the center rose a villa gleaming white against the dirt. Beautiful, cold, merciless. That was my new world. The overseer met us there, a man named Lucius Vero. His skin was burned by the sun, his eyes as sharp as the whip he carried. He looked at us the way a butcher looks at livestock, counting value, not faces. He spoke loudly so all could hear. "Welcome to your new home," he said. "Here, you eat when you work, you drink when you bleed, and you rest when I allow it. Disobey once, and you'll feed the crows." Then he smiled. That smile was worse than the whip. They divided us into groups, strong men for plowing, young boys for harvesting grapes, and women for the mills and kitchens. I was given a shovel, my hands still blistered from my last punishment in Rome. The fields were alive, not with joy, but with suffering. Rows upon rows of bent backs, darkened skin, and silent mouths. Every morning the horn sounded, and we worked until our bodies forgot what mercy felt like. The Roman sun was cruel. It stripped your strength and roasted your hope. Sweat turned to salt, salt to blood. I learned that in the fields, your worth was measured by endurance. Not skill, not thought, not soul, only endurance. Sometimes, when I lifted my eyes, I'd see the villa far away, white and distant, its marble shining like a false god. I used to wonder what they were doing inside, feasting, laughing, living, while we drowned in dust and pain to fill their cups. The overseer's whip sang every hour. It became a rhythm: crack, silence, moan, crack, silence, moan, like a heartbeat of despair. Once, I saw a boy, barely 15, collapse beside me. His shovel slipped from his hand, his body trembling. Vero walked over, calm as the morning breeze, and said, "Up." The boy didn't move, so the whip fell. Once, twice, thrice, until the boy's breath left him. No one spoke. No one dared. The silence that followed was the truest sound of slavery. That night, as the moon rose, we buried him in the corner of the field. No name, no prayer, just dust to dust. The earth that fed Rome now fed one more forgotten soul. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, and then I remembered mine. How long before I joined him in that soil? Days turned into weeks. My hands bled until they hardened into leather. My back became a canvas for scars. Hunger was constant, thirst a cruel teacher. Sometimes, the guards would drop water jugs near us and laugh as we fought like animals to drink first. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, an older man named Ephraim spoke to me. He had been a slave longer than I had been alive. His beard was gray, his eyes the color of dust. "You're still looking at the horizon," he said quietly. "That's dangerous." "What do you mean?" I asked. He smirked sadly. "Hope kills faster than hunger. Don't look for freedom. Look for tomorrow." Those words hit me harder than any whip. Because deep down I had still been dreaming. Dreaming of escape, of my old home, of hearing my mother's voice again. But Rome doesn't leave room for dreams. It grinds them until they're unrecognizable. Still, I couldn't let go completely. There were moments, rare, fragile, when the world softened, like when rain fell on the fields, washing away the dust, and for a few heartbeats, I could smell life again. Or when the wind carried laughter from distant villas, laughter that reminded me of something I once knew. But the rain never lasted long. One afternoon, the guards brought new slaves, fresh faces, still defiant, still human. Among them was a woman. She was young, with eyes like storm clouds. Her wrists were bruised, her hair tangled, but she carried herself with something rare: dignity. They put her near the olive trees, and even under the sun's cruel gaze, she did not bow her head. That night, when most had fallen asleep, she whispered across the field, "What's your name?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. No one had asked me that in years. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "Tiro." She smiled faintly. "No, that's what they call you. What's your name?" And in that instant, just for a breath, I remembered. My real name. The one my mother gave me. The one Rome had stolen. I whispered it into the dark. She smiled again. "That's the name you keep," she said. "Never let them take that from you." Her words were a spark. Small, but enough to light something inside me. From that night, every lash, every insult, every drop of blood, I counted it as survival, not defeat. because each breath I took was proof that I was still me, no matter what they tried to erase. But Rome doesn't like sparks, and soon it would try to crush mine. Because one night, under the cover of storm clouds, someone tried to escape, and when slaves try to run, Rome doesn't forgive. Thunder rolls in the distance. The voice grows tense, faster, trembling slightly, as if remembering a night carved in terror. We were all woken by shouting. Torches blazed through the rain. Guards stormed the fields, dragging a man by his hair. He was one of ours. I didn't even know his name. His legs were broken, his body drenched in mud. The overseer stood before us, rain dripping from his face, whip in hand. "This," he shouted, "is what happens when a slave forgets his place." And then he made us watch. They tied the man to a post, right in the middle of the field, and left him there through the night for the wind, the rain, and the crows. His screams haunted the dark until they faded into silence. When morning came, the field smelled of iron, not from the tools, but from blood. That day something inside me broke, but not in the way Rome wanted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was rage, quiet, cold, waiting. And as I stood under the same sun that had burned me 100 times before, I realized the fields of Rome could break my body, but not the memory of freedom. That memory I would protect, even if it killed me. The sound of the whip fades. The wind grows distant. The voice lowers to a whisper. Because someday, someone must tell the world how Rome was truly built, not by emperors, but by slaves, chains of the heart. They say the heart can survive hunger, pain, and even fear. But in the fields of Rome, what the heart couldn't survive was hope. After that night, the storm, the punishment, the silence, everything changed. We worked in dread, moving like ghosts under the sun. The guards' eyes lingered longer, their whips struck harder. The earth itself felt cursed. Yet even in that darkness, something began to stir inside me. Something I didn't understand at first. It began with her. Her name was Livia, the same woman who had asked me for my true name. The one who reminded me that somewhere beneath the chains, I still existed. She moved differently than the others. When she worked, there was still grace in her movement, pride in her silence. Rome had taken her freedom, but not her spirit. We spoke only in whispers, when the overseer's eyes turned away. Sometimes only a glance passed between us. And yet it said more than 100 words ever could. At night, when the campfire burned low, she would tell me stories, not of gods or emperors, but of the sea. "I was born near the coast," she said once. "When the wind blew right, you could taste salt in the air." My mother used to say the ocean is where souls go to remember they were once free. I remember closing my eyes then, imagining waves crashing against rocks, the sound of gulls, the scent of the tide. For a few moments I wasn't a slave. I was a man again. But in Rome, even dreams had a price. One evening, the overseer saw us talking. It was nothing, a brief exchange, a passing word. But in his eyes, it was defiance. Slaves weren't meant to look at each other like equals. We were meant to bow, to break, to obey. The next morning, Livia was gone. I asked where she'd been taken, but no one would answer. Some whispered she'd been sold to another villa. Others said she'd been punished. For days, I couldn't eat. I worked in silence, my hands bleeding, my heart burning. Then, one night, as the moon hung pale above the vineyards, I saw a figure by the edge of the field, weak, limping, but familiar. It was her. She had been beaten, her face bruised, her wrists swollen. I ran to her, catching her before she fell. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They wanted to make me forget." But I didn't. I held her hand, cold, trembling, and for the first time in years I felt something more powerful than fear. Love. It was madness, I know. Love between slaves was forbidden. We didn't own our bodies, our thoughts, our breath. How could we own our hearts? Yet, in that moment, it didn't matter. For one fleeting instant, we were human again. We began to steal time, moments between dawn and dusk, hidden words under the rustle of leaves, touches disguised as work. In a world built on obedience, our silence became rebellion. And rebellion, in Rome, always finds punishment. One morning, as we were gathering grapes, a guard noticed us again. Maybe it was the way my eyes followed her, or the way she smiled faintly at me. Whatever it was, it sealed our fate. That evening, I was dragged before Vero, the overseer. His whip rested across his lap like a sleeping serpent. "You've forgotten your place, Tiro," he said quietly. "You think you can love? You think slaves have hearts?" I didn't answer. He stood, circling me like a predator. "Love is for Romans. You are nothing." Then he struck me. Once, twice, again. Each lash tore flesh, but I refused to scream. My silence enraged him. The whip fell harder until the world blurred into pain and darkness. When I awoke, I was lying in the storage hut, my body on fire. Livia was beside me, whispering my name. "You should have stayed quiet," she said softly. "I can't," I managed to whisper. "They can break my body, but not this." She smiled faintly, her tears glistening in the torchlight. "Then promise me," she said. "If one of us gets free, tell our story." I nodded. That was the night I swore. If I lived, I would make the world remember. But Rome, it seems, always hears promises it doesn't like. A few days later, new orders came from the villa. A Roman noble was hosting a grand feast in the city, and they needed extra servants. The overseer chose a few of us, including me. When I turned to look for Livia, she wasn't among the chosen. Our eyes met across the field. Neither of us spoke. The chains between us were tighter than ever, invisible, but unbreakable. As the cart rolled away toward Rome, she raised her hand slightly. A small, trembling wave goodbye. I never saw her again. Soft, instrumental strings rise, slow, aching, filled with loss. The city smelled of wine, roses, and sin. Rome glittered at night, torches flickering, laughter spilling through marble halls, music echoing off the walls of the rich. But beneath that beauty, we slaves moved like shadows, unseen, unheard. I served wine to men who spoke of honor and victory, their voices slurred by luxury. I watched as they bragged about their conquests, not just of lands, but of people, and I realized something cruel. Rome didn't just enslave bodies, it enslaved minds. Even free men were chained by greed, by power, by the illusion of greatness. When the feast ended, I was left in the courtyard to clean the marble floors. The moon shone through the pillars, silver and cold. I looked up, whispering to the sky. "Are you watching, Livia? Do you see me?" A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of olives, like the fields, like her. And in that moment, I knew love had not been my weakness. It was my rebellion. Because Rome could take everything, my name, my freedom, my future. But it could never teach me how to stop feeling. And that was my quiet victory. The fire crackles again. The voice lowers, calm but resolute. Every night after that, I told myself her words. If one of us gets free, tell our story. I didn't know how or when or if I'd ever be free, but I knew I would survive long enough to remember, because memory is the last weapon the enslaved can hold, and mine was still sharp. The price of rebellion. They say when a man is beaten long enough, he forgets how to stand. But they were wrong about me. I hadn't forgotten. I was only waiting. Months passed after the feast in Rome. I was sent back to the countryside, to the same fields that had drained the life from me. But something inside had changed. The fear that once controlled every breath had burned away, replaced by something dangerous. Rage. It lived quietly inside me at first. I hid it beneath bowed shoulders and empty eyes. I learned to smile when ordered, to kneel when told. But every whip, every insult, every drop of blood only sharpened the blade within. And then came the day that changed everything. It began like any other. The sun high, the air thick, the overseer's voice cutting through the wind. Vero stood on the rise above the vineyard, barking orders while we bent and broke our bodies below. Then a young slave, barely more than a boy, stumbled. The basket he carried spilled grapes across the dirt. Vero's whip flashed before the boy could even beg forgiveness. "Pick them up," he roared. The boy's hand shook as he tried, but the whip came down again and again until he collapsed. Something inside me snapped. Before I could think, I was moving, my shovel still in hand. The sound of the whip cracked again, and I heard the boy cry out. That was when I struck. The metal shovel hit the overseer's arm with a dull, heavy sound. He screamed, more in shock than pain, and fell backward into the dirt. For one breathless moment, time stopped. The other slaves froze, eyes wide. The guards turned, disbelief turning to fury. I stood there, chest heaving, rain and sweat mixing on my face. For the first time, I wasn't just a slave. I was defiance itself. Then the world exploded. Guards rushed at me, their boots pounding the ground. I swung wildly, the shovel heavy but alive in my hands. One guard fell, another stumbled. Then the whip wrapped around my arm, tearing the skin. I pulled, hard, and the whip came free. For a second, I saw Vero crawling backward, clutching his bleeding arm, his eyes filled with hatred and disbelief. "You'll die for this, Tiro," he spat. And maybe I would, but not kneeling. They overpowered me eventually. Too many, too strong. The butt of a spear struck the side of my head and the world fell into darkness. A long silence. Then a faint dripping sound, echoing through stone walls. When I woke, I was in chains again. Iron this time, heavier than before. The air was damp, the smell of rot thick around me. I was in a cell beneath the villa. Vero came later, his arm wrapped in linen, his face pale with rage. "You think you're brave?" he hissed. "You're nothing. Less than nothing. Tomorrow, I'll make an example of you." He leaned closer. "And the others will watch. They'll see what rebellion costs." When he left, I laughed, quietly, bitterly. Because he was right. There would be a cost. But not the one he expected. The faint sound of rain outside turns into thunder again, building tension. That night, as lightning flashed through the cracks in the stone ceiling, I heard whispers, footsteps. A shadow moved outside my cell, a small figure, hooded, trembling. Then I saw her face, Livia. My heart nearly stopped. She pressed a finger to her lips. "Quiet," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. She pulled a pin from her sleeve and began working on the lock. Her hands shook, but her eyes, they were fierce, determined. How are you here?" I whispered. "They sent me to the villa's kitchens months ago," she said. "I heard what happened. I couldn't let them kill you." The lock clicked. The chain fell. I could barely stand, but she slipped her arm under mine and helped me up. We moved through the shadows of the villa, each step a heartbeat. Outside, the storm raged. Thunder masking our movements, lightning illuminating marble halls like flashes of a god's fury. But just as we reached the courtyard, a voice cut through the rain. "Stop them, Vero. Guards appeared from every side, torches blazing. I grabbed a fallen spear and turned to face them. Livia clung to my arm. "Go," I said. "Run." "I'm not leaving you," she cried. Before I could answer, the first guard lunged. I swung hard, the spear striking his chest. Chaos erupted, shouting, thunder, steel. I don't remember how many I fought, only the taste of blood and rain. Then pain, sharp, deep, a blade across my back. I fell to my knees. Livia screamed, trying to reach me, but a guard struck her down. I crawled to her, my body on fire. She was still breathing, her eyes wide, filled with tears and light. "Tiro," she whispered, "you kept your promise." Her hand fell limp. Something inside me shattered, the last piece that tied me to mercy. I rose again, screaming her name, striking until my arms gave out. The world spun, torches, faces, shadows, and then, once more, everything went black. Silence. The voice returns, softer now, broken, haunted. "They didn't kill me. No, Rome doesn't waste even a broken slave. When I awoke, I was in a prison, a holding pit near the city, where runaway and rebellious slaves waited for their fate. Around me were dozens of others, men and women from every corner of the empire. Some prayed, some cursed, some just stared at the walls, waiting to die. They said we would be sent to the arena, the place where Rome turned suffering into entertainment. I had seen it once, from a distance. The great amphitheater where crowds roared as men and beasts tore each other apart. A place where blood bought applause. That would be my next home. But as I sat there, in the dark, chained and bruised, I felt something strange. Peace. Because for the first time, I had nothing left to lose. I had loved. I had fought. And though I had failed, I had not bowed. They could send me to the arena, to the lions, to the gods themselves. But they would never erase what I had done. For in that brief, violent moment, I had shown the truth, that even in chains, a man can still be free. A pause. The storm fades. The voice lowers to a whisper. Tomorrow, they say, the games begin. Tomorrow, the people will cheer as I bleed. But let them cheer. Let Rome celebrate its illusion of power. Because one day, long after I am gone, someone will remember my name, not Tiro, my true name. And they will know. Rome's glory was built on bones like mine. The smell of blood reached me long before the light did. It was thick, metallic, bitter, the scent of death soaked into sand and sweat. As the guards dragged me forward, chains scraping behind, I could hear the crowd above. Thousands of voices, laughing, shouting, alive, alive. While I walked toward death, I had always wondered what the end would feel like. Would I tremble? Would I beg? Now, as the roar of the arena grew louder, I felt none of that. Only stillness, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to lose. We reached the gate. A massive wall of rusted iron stood between me and the light. I could see the gaps where sunlight streamed through, golden and cruel. Beyond it, the Colosseum, the beating heart of Rome. The guard beside me, an older man with weary eyes, leaned close. "Keep your head high," he muttered. "They love that. Makes the show better." He didn't mean it unkindly. Maybe he had seen too many men die to say anything else. The gates opened. A blinding flood of light hit my face, and the roar of the crowd swallowed me whole. Sound of sand underfoot. The echo of drums grows louder, synchronized with the heartbeat. The arena was vast, a golden circle under a merciless sun. The sand shimmered with bloodstains old and new. Around me, thousands of faces stared down, their cheers echoing off marble and stone. "Bring out the slave," someone shouted. "Let him pay," cried another. I stood in the center, bare-chested, scarred, my wrists still bound by iron. The emperor sat in his grand seat, high above, surrounded by nobles wrapped in silk and gold. To them, I was nothing more than today's entertainment. A voice echoed across the arena, the announcer. From the estates of Senator Vero, a rebellious slave, guilty of defiance and bloodshed. His name. He paused, reading the scroll. Tiro. The crowd jeered. I heard my name bounce off the walls of Rome like an insult. Then came the sound of another gate opening. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, a gladiator. Massive. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, his helmet carved in the shape of a wolf. In his hand, a curved blade shimmered red. The crowd erupted. This was no execution. This was a spectacle. The drums quicken. Breathing grows heavier. The gladiator circled me like a predator. I had no weapon, only my chains. He struck first, a clean, sharp swing that cut through the air. I moved by instinct, barely dodging, the blade grazing my arm. Pain flared, but I barely felt it. The crowd cheered. "Fight! Fight!" He lunged again. And this time I caught the blade in the length of my chain, twisting hard. The metal screeched. For a moment we were locked, two men, both trapped in different cages. Our eyes met through his helmet. And in that brief glance I saw something I hadn't expected. Pity. Then he pushed forward, breaking the chain loose, and swung again. The blade slashed my side. I fell to one knee, blood pouring down my ribs. The crowd roared. But I didn't stay down. I forced myself up, one breath at a time. The pain was fire, but I let it burn. The chain in my hand felt alive. I swung it, once, twice. And it struck the gladiator's arm, denting the armor. He staggered. The crowd gasped. I moved again, faster now, spinning the chain around his neck and pulling with everything I had left. He struggled, his blade cutting my arm, but I didn't stop. The world narrowed to the sound of my heart, the tightening chain, the cry of a man who had killed too many. Then, silence. He fell. The wolf helmet rolled across the sand. The crowd erupted, half in awe, half in horror. A pause. The crowd fades to a distant murmur. The voice returns, softer, almost peaceful. For a moment I stood alone, under the sun, surrounded by thousands, but utterly alone. My body trembled, my vision blurred, but I stood tall. High above, the emperor rose from his seat. The crowd waited for his signal, life or death, mercy or the blade. He lifted his hand slowly, eyes fixed on me. And then, with cruel serenity, he turned his thumb down. The arena roared. From the gate behind me came the growl of beasts, lions, starved for days. The guards backed away. The gates opened wide. I turned to face them. They emerged, golden fur, rippling muscle, eyes burning like the sun itself. One roared, the sound shaking the air. I didn't run. I dropped my chains, the metal thudding softly into the sand. My body was broken, but my soul was freer than it had ever been. The lions charged. For an instant everything slowed. The sun flashed in the sky. The wind rushed through the arena, and I felt peace. I thought of Livia's smile, of the fields before Rome took them, of the river where I had once watched the sky's reflection and believed the world was kind. And in that final moment, I whispered her name. Livia. The world turned white. The sound of wind returns. Soft, gentle. Then, the voice, distant, almost ethereal, speaks one last time. They say Rome remembers its victories, but I hope one day it remembers its slaves too, because our stories, the pain, the chains, the silent cries in the dark, built those marble walls more than any emperor ever did. I am no hero, no warrior, just a man who once lived and dared to believe that freedom was not a dream, Maybe that is enough.